So welcome, Katie Anderson, um,
Thanks.
in Dallas, Texas. Katie is in the morning. I'm in the late afternoon here in Berlin. And the last time we met, and the first time we met was in September during Unga in New York City at the Cartier Red Box Me event. And I was so intrigued about your comment. So I thought, oh, this woman sounds so interesting. And then I found out about all these amazing things you do, which of course we will talk about later more. So before we start, I want to ask you a few questions. What is your current state of mind?
Current state of mind. Open, interested, curious. Yeah, that feels about right. That feels like my open state of mind. I mean, my current state of mind.
Nice. How would you describe your idea of perfect happiness?
My idea of perfect happiness. To me, the idea of perfect happiness presents this idea that there's a arrival versus maybe what I would say is that I feel what's actually achievable versus a consistent state is the pursuit of. So am I able to create happiness in my pursuing of perfect happiness? And I think that could garner a more successful achievement opportunity than identifying this state of being and then trying to ultimately live it. Versus, I mean, I guess we could say that the pursuit is also a state of being, but to me, it's about organizing myself to relate with life in such a way that my relating creates happiness regardless of the outcome of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. Lovely. Which living person do you most admire?
Living person. Oh man. Most admire. This shifts. Who comes to mind when you ask me that though is Alanis Morissette.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that she's normed a very abnormal life. I also feel
Okay.
like she writes not because she thinks to write and instead writes because it's just what happens. So there's this willingness to be visible amidst her own lack of control. And I find a lot of bravery in that.
Wonderful. Yes, I have to listen to her again.
Yeah, she's from back in the 90s, 2000s.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, no, I have to listen to her again. I had also had this phase where I was just going for Amy Winehouse again, like up, down, and
Yeah.
up and down. I was just like, I suddenly had this like, it needs to be Amy 24/7.
Isn't that interesting how we have phases? We just have phases and we're drawn to it. And I can do songs on repeat. And there would just be blips of moments of sort of pops of, yes, that's, I needed to hear that line or I needed to hear that word or even hearing the same word or the line that I've heard 1,000 times because of where I am in my life. I hear it differently and in a way that I need to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, music is such a companion, right?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, the
Yeah.
beauty about music is that, especially if you remove the words, is I almost feel like music has this ability to move us amidst our lack of control. So here I am again talking about a lack of control, and I feel like music has that power. So regardless if you want it to, it's going to move you. I mean, regardless whether you like it, hate it, etc. It's just a mover.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I told you in my podcast, I'm talking to women about a pivotal moment and a turning point in their life. And I'm really speaking to women from all over the world. Texas, for example. And I'm so excited for you to be here, because when we had a conversation on that evening in New York back in September, I thought it was so fascinating how you talked about, on the one hand, you're an entrepreneur and you have a company and you have employees and clients and so on and so forth, but you somehow are luckily able to find time to explore completely different parts of the world, I guess parts of yourself, and travel and experiment and be, pretty, how can I say, gutsy and wild. But you said that for you, a pivotal moment was that when you were in college, and for the first time you really came across this word entrepreneur, and that kind of got you going into thinking how liberating this might be to go down that path. So of course, I'm curious to know, that happened. How did this work out the way you envisioned?
Yeah, it's a great topic. I grew up in a 65 people. I mean, my surroundings were 1,500 acres of woods, and we were decently free to wander around in there. The beauty of that kind of surrounding was that I didn't realize until my later life, reflecting back at my childhood, that the gift in that kind of upbringing was this unbridled creativity. I mean, truly, the nature was just there, and whoever I was and whatever I was going to be, nature just created that, and then that was my day every day. Since then, I feel like I've lived a life where I've tried on a lot of what society says is successful. So, go to college. Okay, great. Okay, what's this college thing? Let me go to college. And then from there, be a doctor or a lawyer. Okay, great. I really entertain the doctor piece of it. And so I think why that particular moment became a big shift for me was I had never heard the word entrepreneur before. That word had never even crossed into my ethers. And what's interesting about it is I know that the word has its specific definition. And what I really took away from reading about an entrepreneur was not necessarily entrepreneur, and more, wait, you're telling me that I can just create a life. I can just create a life. I don't have to, it doesn't have to look a specific way, because up until this point, I was thinking, okay, here's a doctor, here's a lawyer, I mean, now know what I know. I could even put entrepreneur in this arena. So this is what an entrepreneur is. This is what it looks like. This is their pathway. This is how their life looks. Now, at the time, I took entrepreneur because it felt the most free. And I would say that my most recent realizing is that it comes with its own shackles. And so what I realized for me is that any sort of defined role comes with shackles. And if I am in pursuit of a defined role, then ultimately I'm going to sign myself up for that. And so I did embark on this entrepreneur world. I started companies. I started my first company roughly 11 years ago. That was actually the award I received by Cartier. I have employed upwards of 52 people. I've really done it. And I didn't realize it. So I also started out as an employee. So I got to ride that pathway for a little bit. And, there were many things that were actually pretty enjoyable about being an employee. And goodness, there were many things just completely unenjoyable about being an employee. And and being an employer looked like the remedy. So if I'm an employee and my situation, well, the other side of this is to become an employer. And so I hit that ground running about 11 years ago, and I have been an employer up until about a week ago. So when you which maybe
So
is
we're going
really
to
what my
talk about
pivotal,
another shift.
well, that maybe that's actually what this, we set this call up quite a bit ago, and this hadn't happened yet. But the moment I'm talking about. So when you
Hmm.
ask what's a pivotal shift in your life, I almost feel like I'm in one, like I'm in
Hmm.
one more or
Hmm.
less so than, ones that have happened in my past that I can talk about thoroughly through, and I can talk about the ripple afterwards. It's realizing that I've actually just now embarked on a pivotal shift in my life. And I have thoughts and feelings about maybe what's on the other side of this, but I'm not quite sure. And, I was also thinking about this right before our call, which is how often do we build up to these pivotal moments,
Hmm.
and then we finally get the courage to make them, and then we're in it. We're in the pivot. And then there's the after that pivot. And often conversations like this happen after a pivot. So I'm able to sit
Hmm.
here and communicate with you the
How?
lead up, the pivot itself, and how it and the outcome. But it's I feel like if there's encouragement to be had, it's being willing to discuss how it is within a pivot. And if
Yes.
somebody's even
Yes.
thinking about making a pivot, that
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
to share and be visible amidst the inside of a pivot when we don't really know the outcome. We have thoughts and feelings about the outcome, but we don't really know
Yeah.
the outcome.
No, definitely. I mean, let's get to that. Just
So
I
what is
just
my
want to
pivot?
no,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
just I
Go.
just want to back up first. So you read the entrepreneur. You decided you were an employee. You decided to become the employer, the entrepreneur, to go for it. And what you chose, the area you chose was water.
I
And
did.
with Safe Water Co., you created a company and a concept to teach. Correct me if I'm wrong. To teach, people in private homes, but also primarily bigger real estate developers uh, about how to properly install the water drains and the toilets and how much water can be saved through this. I mean, that was mind-boggling. It was like, there was a number. It's like 60%. Uh,
Yeah, it's
um,
my average. If I
yeah.
touch on, so my main focus, my goal was always in the question, how can I create the most amount of impact in the shortest period of time? And so with that thought, the target market became apartments, multifamily. If you think about it, you can go into an apartment property, you might have 200 families living in one driveway. So if I'm going to save the most amount of water possible, approaching a market like that makes a lot of sense because I just need one yes, and I can enter into one driveway and I can impact 200 families. And our average savings right now, if I touch a property, is roughly 55%, which means that I can actually cut the consumption of this 200 family complex by 50% and not impede livable experience. So the idea here is how can I cut consumption, enhance living experience without changing
Mhm.
behavior? We can do that successfully at 55%. So we've probably impacted over 110,000 apartment units across the United States in the last 11 years. I mean, we've billions and billions of
Wow.
gallons of water. It's been a super amazing 11 years filled with success, also filled with many white flags, cries, celebrations, the whole entire thing. Ultimately, though, realizing that from an idea, a lot of hard work, that, it's possible,
Hmm.
completely possible.
Hmm. Wow. I mean, that's an amazing business. So are you also, have you always on the side, also have you been involved with like environmental organizations and have you been active, in this whole realm through your whole entrepreneurial career?
So yes and no. I have, earlier this year, I was in Chicago for the Water Efficiency Alliance organization. And I've worked with municipalities. I've had conversations. Even locally with the Texas Water Development Board, sharing our results, sharing what's possible. I've read conservation plans and realized that they're highly underestimating the possibility with water and essentially going to the table and saying, hey, for a fraction of the cost, I can achieve your 2060 goal within about 5 to 10 years. And so my interactions in that regard have been in that arena sharing. I find though that the slowness of that particular process for me, who I do enjoy speed, and I have this goal of the most amount of impact in the shortest period of time, find it most easeful to at the same time go with the private sector and actually generate results. So that was kind of my thought, was I can share what's happening while also at the same time doing it what it is that I know is completely possible. And so I thought mostly our focus has been with the private sector. I also go to them and I say, I used to be a financial appraiser. So I'll go to these ownership groups who have these portfolios. And essentially what I let them know is, hey, for $500,000, I can make you 5 million. And they oftentimes say yes to that. Now I know the byproduct of me doing that is all of this good. So water getting saved, et cetera. And I would say that that's probably been my MO with my particular business sets and my mindsets, is I really enjoy finding something I feel passionate about, building a business around it, and then allowing for people to pretty much stay who they are. So these financial groups love money, great, stay who you are. Residents, you love your water intake, fine, keep your behavior. And then with all of that still staying the same, what becomes possible? And that's really what flourished our particular model.
So cool.
Thanks.
But you just said that you've been an entrepreneur for 11 years and that you are now in the pivot. And of course, I'm curious.
What's happening?
Whatever you can share.
Yeah, it's fascinating because at one point in my life, I even wondered if I had what it took to be successful as an entrepreneur. And to now realize that I'm laying down a version of that. So the answer is yes, I do have what it takes to build a business from scratch, grow it successfully, again, upwards of 52 employees. So yes, I have what it takes and have success. And the beauty is that water's not going anywhere. It's still a need. It's still a passion. So it's not like this business is going to go out of business anytime soon. I mean, for the rest of my life, as long as humans still require water, this business model is successful. I think for me personally, what I feel slightly different in my outlook with my businesses is that they're not necessarily separate from me. So for me, business isn't simply a means of making money, though that is a part of it. It's a means of creativity. It's a means of storytelling. It's a means of relationship. So, the world does a great job of telling us who we are. You're an employee or an employer. And then also the world does a great job of saying, and also this is what that means. So you need to act this way and you need to act this way. And this is your right. And this is your right. And this is what you can and cannot do. And this is what you can and cannot do. And for me, the limitations I have found within that particular dynamic, I have felt to be decently unsatisfying. So if I'm not a person who's geared toward power and control, then how do I be with a dynamic that has operated in that manner since the beginning of its time? Meaning, no matter how much I wanted to be seen simply as me as an individual, having the hat of boss and owner and founder were stronger than any of that. I found it pretty limiting with me and whomever it was that I was working with. And I'll give you an easy example. Let's talk about pay. So it's like, as an employee, one of my problems was that somebody else was controlling my pay. Well, fine, I'll solve that. I'll become the employer. And so therefore I'll have control of my pay. Well, that's fantastic. Sure did. I became an employer. And then all of a sudden, however much I want to write myself as a check is how much I want to write myself as a check. What I didn't expect though, but it's very natural, is all of a sudden when I started bringing more team members, they were waiting for me to tell them how much they were going to get paid. It's like, of course, because that's the dynamic that as an
Yeah.
employee, I
Yeah.
wait for somebody I also wait for somebody to accept me, see me, approve of me. It's just the dynamic. And so
Mhm.
where I was able to gain all of these things for myself that I couldn't get as an employee, meaning self-approval, self-acceptance, um, however much I want to get paid, I then found myself to be in a seat of having to do that for someone else. And I had a real problem with that. And how am I supposed to know what you are supposed to be paid? If I'm over here trying to take care of myself as far as acceptance and telling myself I'm good enough, and you're wanting me to do that for you, and not just one of
Such a
you, like 50 of you are wanting me to do this for you. And so what I found was I got consumed. It was
Mhm.
consuming. The role is consuming. And I remember talking to two folks that have been with me for since the beginning, and I was saying, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this dynamic. And they said, well, do you want one of us to do it? And I was like, meaning, do you want us to take over, pay raises? And I said, I don't think you're hearing me. I have a problem with the dynamic. So
Mhm. Mhm.
if I'm not okay with it, I'm not okay with just paying somebody else to do it. That means I am distracting it still lives. The problem still lives. And so as a way to start sort of radically approaching this problem, I said, one, no, I'm not paying and it's not going anywhere else. Two, I'm going to flip the script. And so what I did is I called every single one of my employees, and I annihilated the idea that any boss or manager would have control over their income. And I just flat out asked them, hey, how much money do you think you should be making? And then the other part of this was, and at some point you feel like you get a raise, will you call me? And if I don't hear from you, then I'm going to just assume that you're good. Because what that does is it frees me up to be more of
Mhm.
me and be able to focus in my world versus worrying about all this other piece. So to me, that's just one example that, yes, there were a lot of beautiful things that came with becoming an entrepreneur, but then there were all these other pieces, like the same problems that I hated as being an employee still exist. They still exist. I'm just on the other side of the coin with the problem. It was fascinating. It took me a
Mhm.
long time to realize that.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's very fascinating. And the employees, it's a special form of trust, right? And it's not something that we are in general used to in a
Hmm.
company. Of course, not in a large company, but even there. And were they were they open to it? And was it like a
Well, it was a pretty
trans
fascinating. So what,
transparent good situation for everyone? I mean,
what,
did they see the opportunity in it?
what's fascinating, I've shared this story a few times, and
Mhm.
the questions that roll in are, it's a fascinating experiment. I mean, what actually
Mhm.
would happen? And then a person gets to ask themselves, well, what would I do in my situation? Would I name a higher price? Would I, et cetera? And how this moment even happened for me was I was talking to an employee at the time. His name was Hyan Wu. He was in our technology world. And I was actually calling to give him a raise. And on that call, when I gave him the raise, he said no. And it blew my context. It blew my context. And I was thinking, wait, what? Like, who says no to a raise? Who says no to a raise? And I said, wait, I don't understand. And he said, well, I have goals. I have my own goals. And if you give me a raise before I've met my own goals, then I feel like, well, then what's the point of achieving the goals? And I said, well, wait, you haven't even shared that you have these goals. And he said, I know, because they're my own goals. And it was just in this moment of
Fascinating.
interaction that I was thinking, what is happening here? I said, so
Yes.
wait, let me just make sure I understand. You've set your own goals. You have not shared them with anyone. They were set by you. You don't have a manager who's saying, hey, we need to set you some goals. You have some money that you associated to achieving those goals. And what you're sharing is that you're uninterested in any kind of money until you've achieved your own set of goals. Yes. And it was just this realizing that
Mhm.
what
Mm,
absolutely lives in us, because I just witnessed it, is a line of integrity that is
mhm,
intrinsic. Has
mhm.
nothing to his goal setting, his value, his none of that had anything to do with anyone else. It was fully created from within this person. He wasn't looking at
But
what
he,
so and so was making, or what this person was making, what the market was doing. It was just him.
but then I assume he must have also felt safe in in his surrounding, in your company. And since you are the founder, you must have instilled, right, some of this. So, I mean,
Either instilled
it's
it.
all
Yeah,
connected.
sure. I mean, I can imagine that there would have to be a safe environment for that style of interaction to go on.
Hmm.
What I know is that I in that moment trusted him beyond. I mean, I said, here's the deal. You obviously are operating from something beyond us. And I I just want you to just let me know, because you're clearly listening, looking, paying attention to something that is beyond us. I said, so here's the deal. When you're ready for a raise, you just call and let me know. And my only job is to just go make it happen. That's my only job. And he said, okay. And I said,
Yeah.
great, thanks. I got off the phone with him. I made a phone call to everyone else and did the exact same thing. I said, here's the deal. You're fired. I'm fired. We are fired from this kind of relationship with one another. From this point forward, you are now in control of this particular piece of your life. So you're going to tell me how much you make and when you should get raises, what you're working on. And my only job is to make it happen when the phone call comes in. Or if you need something specific to help yourself achieve those goals, whether it's a class, whether it's a piece of equipment, et cetera, that becomes my role in this particular organization. And then one of the most
That's,
common questions I get after this is, did anybody give themselves a raise? Like,
mhm.
did somebody say something? And do you know, not a single phone call came, not a single
Yeah,
one asking
yeah,
for a raise.
yeah. Of
I'm not saying
course, I
that's good,
believe
bad, right, or
that.
wrong, just interesting.
No, it's interesting, but I also believe that, yeah, because I think there's no need for action because one feels safe.
Well,
And
I think
also maybe one needs a moment to grapple with it and think about it for oneself. But honestly, I feel it's this trust part and the safety part, and we are usually not confronted with such a good thing, right, in usual operations and companies.
well, I get applauded for the environmental work that I've done in Save Water Co. And what I am unable to sort of separate is the holistic piece of what is going on inside of a company. So yes, we have this mission and we're going toward this mission. And also what's happening here is a group of individuals are coming together to produce the outcome. And so if that outcome is positive, is the whole organization healthy? So great. We have achieved a business construct where the outcome is healthy. But what about our inner workings?
Hmm.
And I just, it wasn't good enough, truthfully.
Hmm.
Just only having a positive, healthy outcome wasn't good enough. I could not help and turn my head at the inner workings of us, human to human, that relationship. And to me, that also needs equal attention, equal support, and equal
Hmm.
healing, as we
Hmm.
would maybe even define missions and values of companies' goals. So to me, it's like, great,
Hmm.
check. Mission, values, goals of the
Hmm.
organization, check. I mean, some are still trying to even achieve that. That's okay. And so now let's look at this internal piece, because to me, it was also fascinating. I was surrounded with a group of people. We all loved each other. Very close, very trusting, even as the conversation or the piece of this conversation I just shared.
Hmm.
And what we were dealing with was kind of genuine emergent chaos. Like maybe the best way I could describe it. It's companies are operating in an emergent state. So essentially,
Hmm.
one problem we have is that we are walking around anxious all the time. just in regards to pretty much everything, with each other, with the world, with clients, customers, vendors, just kind of in this anxious. And so a part of this was, okay, we've got our goal, we've got our outcome that's healthy. Now, how can we create the getting to that outcome goal to be also healthy? What does that look like? How does our interactions with each other look like? What does that coming together look like?
And that is the pivot you are in
That's it. That's
right
the pivot
now?
I'm in. That's it.
Yeah.
So I started
And
my business 11 years ago and
mm,
entered into this just world of employee employer. Now I have done everything I can to create as best an environment in that particular dynamic as possible. Again, example I just gave is,
mhm,
how can I really bring a state of equality, a state of justice, a state of easefulness to the employer-employee dynamic. And about
mhm,
5 years ago, I started dreaming up another way of doing this, meaning
mhm,
surely there is another way that can ultimately come together and achieve this same goal. And it's been 5 years in the making. And in a couple of weeks ago, I just ultimately said, it's time. It's time to make this shift. And it is, we have to exit the employer-employee relationship. So for me and
mhm.
you to know what else is possible, we have to get out of this relationship. This is not going to support us. And I made the final decision a few weeks ago, which ultimately means I have released every W-2 employee from my field. And I am now in the middle of what's next. What does this look
Mhm,
like?
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
Ultimately, what I'm gaming for is ease, freedom, flexibility, an individual to really showcase their uniqueness. Um, and ultimately, at the basis of all of it, it's going to be trust. It's just trust. I feel like
mhm,
that's the
mhm,
piece that's necessary to heal the relationship between human to human is trust.
mhm,
So then how do
mhm.
we begin to fester an environment where that's even possible? What are the pieces necessary to be in place for us to be able to trust each other again? What what needs to be here? What does that look like? What does that look like? And
So
again, the businesses are here. I have no desire to close the businesses. I love the goal of the businesses. I love the missions. And what I refuse though is that there's no goal or mission that's good enough to also continue the
mhm.
unhealthiness of the coming together of us is really what I think I landed in.
It's fascinating, really, to hear this because, yes, why not? Why not recreating a different structure or a different way of how people are coming together to fulfill a mission? I mean, that's very
Yeah,
loosey,
I'm like,
but why
that's, I might,
why not? Yeah. And
I,
it can be
mhm.
so beneficial and looking, often at the structure now and how much I don't know, unsatisfaction, big topic is loneliness at work. Like all these things have developed through common old structures, not all of them bad, of course, yeah, but why not, if you have the possibility, rethink and pull through with it. I
Yes, I
find
mean, we as
that's
a,
really inspiring. Thank you.
well, it's interesting because we as a society, we're trying to innovate the content, and I
Mm.
mean, AI is a
Hmm.
great example. AI just came into the market. It's, that's an example of inventing new content. We've got Elon Musk launching rockets. There's advances in content, and yet there hasn't been any advance in the construct of which the content moves. We're
Hmm.
still being with each other the exact same way that we always have. And again, I can speak most for myself. To me, when at the beginning, when you asked about happiness, is the older I get, the more experience I have, I think happiness has less to do with the content of my life. I'm beginning to believe it has actually more to do with the construct of my life, how I'm choosing to be with life. And I feel like that's the unhappiness that we are experiencing as a society within our work lives, I feel has absolutely nothing to do with the content that we're working on. And it's more of our organized construct that we're in with each other, that's the actual unsatisfying piece. And I know this because if you create a wonderful environment, I don't know that I actually care what I'm working on. If I'm surrounded with people that I really have fun with, that I'm enjoying, if I'm also in a state of I'm learning something, I'm putting my hands to it, I feel like I'm actually a part of the value. I'm of equal value to the other pieces that are here trying to make or build this thing. It's who am I amidst this construct that I think that creates opportunity for me to feel fulfilled as a person amidst this team. And it ultimately doesn't matter what we're building. Doesn't matter what we're building.
Yeah, I agree. Interesting. I just want to quickly, towards the end, also point out what I read about you and what you also had shared in our conversation, that you also, kind of had the liberty of taking yourself out of the everyday and be experimental with like wild explorations and swimming with whales and racing horses across deserts and what else happened. And these activities, you said earlier you like speed. Are these experiences also important to kind of balance you or to see, what's beyond?
Great question. When I think about each of these moments, for me, a part of what creates healthiness with life is a, for lack of a better word, balance of what I would call normalcy and abnormalcy.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not every day that you swim in the ocean with a whale. And so to have that experience naturally is going to move me beyond what I know to be real. And what I find is important for myself though is and those are all pivotal moments. Those moments, racing horses in Egypt, swimming with whales in Tonga. I've lived in a van and traveled all around the country. And for me, I think what I'm doing is I'm invoking myself. And that's so that life continues to be interesting. So when you ask about being happy, for me, interest in life for me is an important piece. And so what I recognize though is that I can't have a life of swimming in water with whales. That I still do laundry and, cook myself food, etc. And what I've noticed is that I'll go on these adventures and then I'll want to be home where there's just a level of consistency. I make the same coffee every morning. I have a slower routine. I'll go to the local coffee shop. And then I can just feel it. It's like my system gets, I don't know if restless is the right word, but I just seek something that's going to get me outside of that normalcy. And so that's really what my play has been, is just choosing things that get me outside of my comfort zone that I can't recollect because I've not quite done it. And a part of that adventure is getting to experience a part of me that hasn't been able to be experienced yet. Since I don't swim with whales in the water all the time, the moment that happens, I'm getting to feel myself in a way that I've just never felt before. And that's intriguing. That's interesting. That makes life more livable, in my opinion.
Beautiful. Last question, or last two questions. What do you do to calm yourself down? And what do you do to energize yourself? Well, maybe
that's
swimming with the whales.
That's fun. Calming myself down. I have a little mini dachshund in my life, and she is just little earth incarnate. So wouldn't be unlikely for me to just go pick her up and play with her for a little bit. So she's calming. But I also have this heated body mat that's crystals. And I will turn that on and I get a weighted blanket. And that I can lay on that thing for hours. So that's also another thing I do to calm myself down is I lay on a heated crystal mat with a weighted blanket. And then the third thing I do is that I turn off my sensories. So cover my eyes, I'll cover my ears. And what I really find is that to calm myself down is to close off input. So any particular way that I can close off input is a way to calm myself down. To get myself going is for me all about shifting context. So being spontaneous. If I invite spontaneity into my life, there's an immediate rush of energy. Whether that be, and I've done this, I just go to the airport, I went to the departures and I just looked at the departures. And there was a guy standing there and I said, excuse me, if you were to go fly anywhere on this board right now, where would you fly? And he looked at me and he goes, wait, you don't have a ticket. And I said, I don't. I just want to take some flight that's leaving here in the next hour. And he said, oh, well, I mean, you could do that, or that place is great and that place is great. And I said, great, thanks. I think I'll choose there. Where do I get a ticket? And he said, right over there. I walked over there, bought a ticket, walked to the thing, got on an airplane. I had no idea. I'd never been there. I didn't know. I didn't have a car when I was arriving. I didn't know where I was going to stay. And so that to me is a rush of energy. It's getting myself into a place of the unknown within myself to experience how am I going to be. Right. That's right. So that's, I think the two is like something that's very predictable, which could be silence, closing my eyes, something that's highly unpredictable. And then my energy is probably going to flow in either direction that way.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Fascinating topic today. I really loved it. I thought it was so inspirational.
Thanks so much.
I'll be listening to it again.
That's great.
It was so nice. It was so nice to see you again. So, yeah, I guess have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, Claudia.
Yeah, we'll be in touch. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.